Sup, guys? So last night we watched Charles Oliveira dominate Max Holloway over 5 rounds and win the main event 50-45. This fight was for the BMF title, and a lot of people have had a lot to say about Charles's performance. And more so, they've had a lot to say about Charles as a fighter, and a lot of negative things. Stop complaining. Charles Oliveira owes you nothing. This man has put on so many amazing fights over the years. He's got the most finishes in UFC history. He has one fight which might be considered a little bit boring, and all of a sudden people are like hating on him. First of all, the fight wasn't as boring as people were saying. The first 2 rounds, he was going after the finish pretty hard. Plenty of submission attempts. Max defended well. You know, rounds 3 through 5, were they the most exciting rounds in the world? No, they weren't. But fuck it, you're allowed a boring fight every once in a while. The main issue people are having with this is the fact that it was for the BMF, title. And, we've come to expect with the BMF title, the whole, gimmick is, that, it's a great fight and we're owed a war. Charles Oliveira doesn't owe you fucking nothing, man. Like, it's a gimmick belt. Who gives a fuck? I don't think he gives a fuck. Yeah, he called for the BMF title shot because it was the best fight he could get at lightweight at the moment. His number one priority is getting back to the world championship, which isn't a gimmick belt. So he didn't want to go out there and entertain you as his number one priority, even though he typically does. He wanted to go out there and beat a very dangerous opponent, and that's exactly what he did. Look, are you really going to fucking blame him? He identified a big weakness in Max's game. Max couldn't defend a fucking takedown to save his life. So he'd be a fucking idiot to not go back to that well every single round. If Max could defend the takedown better, they would have spent longer on the feet. And Charles was doing just fine on the feet as well, by the way, to the people who were saying Charles didn't want to stand. So, I don't know. In my opinion, everyone who's complaining about Charles is an entitled, fickle fan. Because, and don't get me wrong, I'm not one of those people who's like, if you don't like wrestling, just go watch boxing. Like, typically, no. Like, I do get when there's people who make a career out of this sort of thing, that it's annoying. But at the same time, it isn't boxing. If you can't defend a takedown, Charles is well within his rights to fucking do it, every round if you're going to let him. So, yeah. The man's had one boring fight. If you turn on him after that, after having the most finishes in UFC history, I don't know what to say to you. But yeah, personally, I think people need to stop complaining. Charles just dominated one of the best fighters in the lightweight division. He dominated a guy who was top 10 pound for pound. And he's probably one fight away from a title shot now. So good for him. I'm happy for him. And he did what he needed to do to win. The BMF is a gimmick belt. And that wasn't his number one priority, was being a BMF. His number one priority was to win the fight, and that's exactly what he did. Oh, but he said all week that he was going to strike. Brother, talk is talk. Once those cage doors close, he can do whatever he wants under the unified rules.